So, so welcome everyone to another installment of ERCG's ABC Leadership Interview Series. We have today two experts in the video format, Jason Beck and Nate Richards of Enerex. And you know, we'll just dive into the questions right away. So Nate, since our last interview in 2016, Energy Frameworks merged with Powermatrix. Can you give a little background on how this came to be? Whose idea was it? Why did you do it? And also, how are things going now that you two companies have merged?
I'll let Jason actually tell the longer story, but I think that background-wise, Powermatrix was always a company that we, in the energy framework side, had respect for. I had a chance to meet Deepinder very briefly, who's now my business partner, based out of New Jersey, at New York TIPA a couple of years ago when I was one of the keynotes there. If people know Deepinder, he's very soft-spoken. He's sort of a low-profile guy. And, I think that there's so much, that's just the very beginning of how much sort of complementary nature there was as we got to know each other better, both principals as well as the rest of the team. And, I'll say, fast forwarding to the end, or maybe even arguably the beginning of the next story, it's been fantastic. I think a lot of people, maybe I can remember when I was single and you're about to get married and you're sort of like, oh my gosh, am I going to regret this? 1 week from now, and there's that fear of the unknown. It's very hard to go back once we kind of pull the trigger on this thing, and there has been none of that, and certainly no regret. And why didn't we do this sooner? If anything, it just made so much sense. But let Jason tell the story, because it is kind of a fun story to it.
Yeah, and it's always interesting, the different perspectives we all share. And first off, Young, thanks for having us today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Being considered considered as one of those industry stalwarts to moving retail energy forward. I mean, you're one of the key guys in that in the industry. So really do appreciate you having us. In terms of the merger story, one of my most fun stories to tell, simply because in my career, I've been with retail energy suppliers for 12 years, and I was always looking for a way to impact the future of retail energy. So after joining Powermatrix in 2017, we grew the company of Powermatrix from 6 to, at the end of 2017, clients to 50 at the end of 2018. And Nate talked about this too. When we first started, Deepinder and I literally said, core is the gold standard. That's who we're going after, right? Like, let's figure out how to be them and then continue to grow. So ton of respect for the company as well. And so, when we were going into 2019, Deepinder and I were pretty confident, that we were going to continue our mission to change retail energy. But then during the 2018 holidays, Nate reached out, grabbed some, said, hey, let's grab some lunch. So we met at an Afghani restaurant. So just to show where Nate and I are foodies. So we had that at the Culture, eat all the different types of food
it's
out
a total
there.
hole in the wall. You'll be like,
yeah,
definitely lock your car when you go to this place, but the food is fantastic.
It was. And then, it was 55 minutes of no conversation about business, literally just a get to know you session. And so it really made me feel like not only like that I had a friend here, right, across the aisle, even though it was a competitor at the time, somebody who I could really relate to. And then in the last 5 minutes, Nate asked the question, why are we fighting against each other? We could be so much more powerful together. And honestly, the statement could not have been more correct, Young. I mean, we both share the same vision to create efficiency in an industry that is incredibly inefficient at communication between the broker and the suppliers. And so we kind of, that's where the idea came from of our mission statement, to connect people through technology to build trust in retail energy markets. And as we talked to the suppliers, Nate and I ran into the same thing. They were both like, if you want to do that, get to size? Well, together, with a stroke of a pen, we were over 100 brokers, over 75 terawatt hours of load, and over 145 BCF of gas. So simply put, 2 + 2 = 5. You asked a question about how smooth it was to integrate. So touching on that real quick, this is the first, on the M&A side, all of my activity in the past had been on bidding on retail books and not winning, or selling books of business, right? So never really a true merger, integrating processes, people, etc. If this is how it works, sign me up for more of them, because it was generally seamless. I'd say about 3 months of discussion from January to get to a deal in principle, another 3 months to do the legal paperwork, because that's a big pain in the butt. And then came this, how do we merge the companies together? And so, on the face of it, think Core Energy Frameworks, they had 10 years of experience working with brokers, right? They had Nate being an entrepreneurial guy in 2 different businesses and just that business prowess. And then the customer loyalty, the brokers that were on the core platform, super, super loyal. On our side, we newer UI UX design, newer software design, a very scalable team. We had 10, and just as an FY, like now we're at 50 developers. So when I say developers, I mean that whole, the whole development team across the aisle. So, but yeah, well, that's what we had. And so the merger was really fairly easy. Karen Altacruz joined the team to take care of customer success. And then it kind of all culminated last year in right around October. We had our 2020 strategic planning session. Nate led the leadership team, which was, Depinder, myself, Karen Altacruz, Director of Customer Success. And we went through a series of exercises, and it really brought the 2 different perspectives where we were unique, but where we could really gel together. And just kind of as a wrap up to this, this is where a lot of our mottos came from. We celebrate progress, which is one of our, our value statements. Even one of our, all for one, one for all, that purple color you see in Nate's background, that came out of that strategy session as well, which is a fun story. So really kind of gelled all of the pieces together during that planning session. And yes, it was awesome.
Great. Yeah. So it sounds like it was a combination of like minds and also kind of completing one another, in terms of perhaps skill sets or people that the other had that you wish you had, things like that. So it's a great complementary business. Congratulations.
Yeah, very true. Very true.
Speaking of pain in the butt processes, changing your company name after all these years. So you announced a new brand in early August. First, why did you do that? And also, how is that going?
Before Nate starts, before Nate starts again, I'll just kind of tell you, it's you say pain in the butt. I literally have customers saying, what name do you go by now? And it's like, I promise you, this is it, Enerex. This is it, I promise, right? But really, really good story behind it of the why. Nate, please.
Well, I was just going to say, we actually, we had this name in mind even before. I think we actually acquired the domain prior to finishing the merger details. So it's been in our mind to take on this bigger vision, bigger identity from even as part of the combination. I think the question was, what's the right timing? Do you sort of change everything in one big bang? Do you stage it? Initially, the plan was to kind of go live with the new brand at the end of the year. That sort of got extended a little bit, just resources to actually build out the new website and generate all of the pieces that is a brand in terms of tangible things. And then COVID came along, and then it kind of became like, well, no one knows how long we're still in the middle of it, right? We don't know how long it's going to be, how long, when, is there a new normal? Is this it? Is there something else on the other side of this? Like, that uncertainty is there. At some point you go, we need to move forward. At this point now, we're hiring. We really want the benefit of this new brand, sort of this refresh, to allow us to go into the marketplace with sort of a modern and a cohesive message. We still had the old Energy Frameworks website, the old Powermatrix website, both of which have like 4 pages. They haven't been updated in years. I mean, this has been a very grassroots development story on both of our sides, other than Jason obviously being a strong sales driver on the Powermatrix side. Energy Frameworks kind of came together all inbound. I never made a cold call. All of our customers heard about us, knew me, knew a customer, maybe used to work at a customer, something like that. It was very organic as opposed to sort of driven and focused. So it just kind of was clear to the whole team that it was time to just, it was now less of a risk to not do it. You know, we need to just sort of go for it, even though, you know, in COVID, maybe your message is not as sort of clear and defined. There's just so much other noise and just sort of apathy for new things right now. But I think the results of it have been phenomenal in terms of just clarity of vision. And I think turning the corner from a company that had a product for brokers from product to platform, that's really the big pivot ideologically. And Jason can maybe speak to some of the kind of ancillary benefits in the marketplace.
Yeah, I'll pick up on that. But, you know, Young, I'll also say, you know, this is kind of where Nate, maybe, you know, humbleness, Nate did almost all of this rebrand with one resource. And so, you know, this is the piece of that I want, you know, and folks to know really about Enerex is just this hardworking and driven nature. None of us, there's not a single person in this company that is not on their toes all the time, trying to move something forward. And brand was a big part of that. And so picking up on that, that was the biggest change with this brand, was the, how clear the message was, right? I've been at this for 3 years. I've been telling people about this vision for retail energy. We were never just a broker product, right? We were always trying to be the platform, having a commonality, the Enerex being a name that people can really kind of understand is, what's your Enerex contract ID? What's your Enerex user ID? If we talk about things like EnerChat, right? So this brand much better tells our story. You know, that the clarity, I think, is really invaluable. And so not only new prospects and renewed conversations from this brand launch in August, that's happening like crazy. But one of the fun stories that I have is, you know, I was looking for somebody to come onto my sales team, right, to double down on our efforts within the broker community, a director of business development. And we posted the opportunity in June. An outpouring of amazing in-industry, in retail energy professional resumes. We went through this detailed 3-part hiring process that we put in place recently, and we yielded some really good candidates. And I was really close to landing a candidate, but then on Monday, the rebrand comes out, and Tuesday I receive a phone call from people who I think a lot of people who listen to this would know is Doug Brennicky. Doug Brennicky was one of the co-founders of the highly regarded retail energy exchange Rex platform that NRG bought back in 2015. And, you know, Doug simply called me up and said, Jason, and I know Doug really well, we've stayed in touch over the years. He said, I want in. He's like, you guys are doing exactly what I wanted to do with the Rex platform. But we were a broker of brokers. So it really always prevented us from getting there and attracting the larger broker firms that, you know, Nate and I have as customers, as clients of ours that we serve on a daily basis. And he said, I want to change retail energy with you. And I said, where do we sign? Right? I mean, it's exactly what you want. And so I really feel like, you know, this type of feedback that we're getting from the marketplace and the clarity of vision of this is really needed for retail energy. It's been great. The brand redo could not have worked out better.
We also just listed a role for customer success, and we had 250 applicants over a matter of weeks. The hardest thing was really dealing with sort of the top 10%. You still have 25 really qualified people, and, you know, making some tough decisions, but ultimately we're able to hire Lacey Price, who was at Insight and then Advantage. So she knows our products. She's worked in the back office of a broker. So, and especially as we sort of press into the core to spark plug transition. You know, she's going to be an instrumental part of that. So, it looks like we're probably going to be hiring for several more roles in the near future. So I think just that visibility and clarity of message, and just a refreshed website, you know, that actually says, hey, this is what we're about. That's been updated, you know, and more recently than just a sort of blog posting basis, and actually talks about the overall platform and what our core values are, what our vision is, you know, what we're about, how we manage our people, what's our culture like. You know, these are things that the story had not really been told well. I think he's really gave us an opportunity to tell that story.
That culture piece cannot be stated enough. I think that's one of the key elements of the rebrand too, that other people now know what our internal culture has been like for the last 3.5+ years on the Powermatrix side and 10 years on the energy framework side. You know, this idea of all for one, one for all, which ended up being a hex color code that Nate found.
Yeah, this magenta, the hex code is A4004A, which is all for one, one for all. So it's sort of like an Easter egg embedded in our brand is this color, which represents our culture.
So you know,
another side effect that Jason didn't mention was we've had some unsolicited acquisition offers come out of this. We've had a lot of investment interest, both from professional money and from sort of industry money. So, you know, none of which we've availed ourselves of, but, you know, it's definitely created some resonance for us in the marketplace, without a doubt.
Excellent. All right, so I've never had a chance to do this before because I've never interviewed, you know, the same company twice.
We're honored to be the first.
Yes.
That's right. And so this is a rare opportunity, and it allows us to reflect a little bit. So it's been about 4 years since that first interview with Energy Frameworks.
Yeah.
You know, Nate, during that interview, you kind of pointed out there are, you know, several issues in the broker supplier industry.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I kind of wanted to get your take on, you know, how much of that has changed 4 years later. And so some of those issues that you talked about were that the broker industry had, you know, too many error-prone manual processes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a chance, you know, in the supplier broker interface, there's just too many cooks in the kitchen. And when you're in a lot of markets, there's just, you know, an issue of lack of standardization. So it's hard to do business. And then finally, there was just kind of a lack of trust between parties. So where, you know, fast forward 4 years, where are we today? You know, did we make good progress on any of those?
You know, I still would say that sadly, most of these have not seen a lot of progress. I think the market itself, you know, the dynamics of the market and how suppliers think about channels, the nature of a channel and how well developed, kind of the periphery of sort of the meat and potatoes, if you will, of the C&I broker has grown. So you think about, you know, the role of a CCA, the role of aggregations, non-municipal aggregations, sort of pooling, the role of the digital channel, especially now with COVID and mass markets being, you know, partially shut down. Certainly the sort of in-person component of mass markets. I think you have mass markets, right? You have kiosks, you have you have telesales that are sort of campaign oriented. So I think the industry has grown beyond maybe 4 years ago. Some of those channels existed, but I don't think they quite got as much attention and were less developed than maybe they are today. You know, we're now powering 4 or 5 different shopping sites online. So we have sort of a digital offering. We're now powering 2 of the 4 CCAs in New York. We actually have a press release coming out about that probably next week. Really thinking about how do we create the CCA of the future. You know, we have a mass market offering and we have aggregation pooling capabilities. So we're trying, one thing that's forced us to do is create sort of a diversity of product feature offerings to manage and maintain all the diversity of processes across those different types of channels, right? It's not just a broker. When we thought of them as ABCs, aggregators, brokers, and consultants, but there's even yet more diversity within that envelope that needs sort of unique capabilities. I do think that this divergence of platforms, I think we really tried to address that with the merger, which was, hey, is there really a sort of lead horse out there that is likely to sort of garner enough market share to be material in terms of the ability to kind of unify the industry? We would love to raise our hands and say that's us. That's what we're out here trying to accomplish. I think representing, by your estimation earlier in one of your webinars you gave, I think US C&I load to be between 600 and 650 terawatt hours projected for 2020, notably down for the first time, right, in some long period of time. And we've watched our procurement, our annual sourcing on our platforms, approaching 80 terawatt hours. So we feel like we continue to sort of gain the mind share in the broker community and gain the deal volume that really sort of starts to make connectivity make sense. Things that haven't changed, there's still no standard. I think there's still this portal kind of mentality out there where, hey, we'll build a portal and everyone will want to log into it. Now that sort of that hasn't really played out well for people who've invested heavily in portals. We don't see today any difference in brokers logging into portals. There's no world where a broker's going to go log into 17 portals, and there's no world where a broker's only going to have 3 supplier relationships. And so I think both of the theses under which portal investment sort of spurred portal investment have not played out. What I do think is now it's like, well, we'll connect API to API, broker to broker, supplier to supplier. And the challenge with that is just, it doesn't scale. So 300 suppliers and 2,000 brokers, 600,000 unique connections. It's just never going to happen. Versus, and both parties have to invest, right, to make one connection. On one end, I've got to convert my data to your format, and you've got to translate back again to me. So 600,000 unique connections versus a hub and spoke model where everybody plugs into a market, right? If I had to call the CFO in The Hague and speak Dutch to buy a share of Shell, right, that would create a problem for the liquidity around Shell's transactions. And I think that's really what we have in retail energy is I've got to connect to REPA and I have to use their sort of the way they want to describe CenterPoint as a utility or this meter or this account. And then I go to another one and they want to see it in a different way. So as a broker, I'm sort of challenged at to have to put CapEx to every supplier relationship. Same thing as a supplier, but even maybe multiplied. I've got I'm a top 5, 6, 7 supplier and I've got 1,000 channel partner relationships or even 500. I mean, how realistically am I going to make 500 unique connections? So they're either hoping that there are less partners in the future and I'll only have to connect with a handful, which I think you look at other sort of agency model industries and you just don't see, the neighborhood broker in insurance, the neighborhood broker in travel. The broker world has never, in real estate, you pick a brokered industry, stocks, equities, energy, other brokered industries, the agency model has never become a 2, 3, 4, 5 horse race. Because what happens is they aggregate, the people leave, they start another shop a year later. So I think that's a different and an uphill battle. Sadly, I don't think a lot has changed other than I think, not to toot our own horn, but I think we have sort of shown ourselves as capable of bringing together a materiality, a consensus belief that this hub and spoke model is in fact a way, and we would say the way, but I think at least we've proven a way to sort of skin the cat of inefficiency and again, connectivity and trust. I mean, these are 2 things. We talk about our purpose statement. Jason mentioned it earlier, connecting people through technology to increase trust in retail energy markets. Connectivity and trust you hear in that statement And those are the two sort of missing elements, right? We want to connect the industry and we want to be the source of trust. If you clear a transaction on our platform, you know the data is good, you know the commissions are right, you know the meters are right, you know the switch dates are right, right? You know that the rate classes are right, you know the load data is right, and you know it was secure, encrypted, you know that your data is protected and private. So that's really what we mean when we say connectivity and trust. And I think that's sort of where we see the industry going in the next 5 years.
I'll add on to that, Young, just saying that, Nate's exactly right. For not over the last 4 years, not much has changed. However, I think that's one of the silver linings in this post-COVID era. I think COVID, the pandemic, I think what people realized is that technology is an enabler, but change is super scary, right? And that's kind of where the balance of technology is always played out. And when I see people in their life is, man, I know I'm going to have to take some time to learn something, right? The first month or two, learning something new is going to be really challenging. And that's right? There's 100% true. There's a lot of truth in that statement. However, now that everyone was thrown into this change together, I've seen more come in the last 6 months. We've obviously had a much bigger in retail energy change in terms of focus on compliance, right? Retail fraud consortium, which you're a founding member on, and so nicely allowed me to become a steering committee member of too. This focus on compliance as well in our industry, I think it's driving change faster in 2020 than I've ever seen before. So while not much has changed in 4 years, I would say in the last 6 months, things are really heating up. And people are really talking about this stuff frequently.
I mean, it takes time to solve these kind of systemic problems. So it makes sense. And yeah, I mean, if you're seeing that there is hope on the horizon for solving some of these issues, that's terrific. So beyond solving problems from 5-10 years ago, what kind of new problems do you think are out there and solvable that you're working on today?
Yeah, I think this really boils down to 3 main topics, and I think these are all challenges that the industry has known for a while, but yet we're solving them in new and unique ways. So the first one we'll talk about is connectivity, right? When I think about connectivity, it's twofold. It's first off, it's in the secure exchange of data and information across broker-supplier relationships. And then the second piece is how the industry communicates. And so we have recently obviously launched Exchange. Exchange is our solution for those that want to communicate, but they want to use their own software. We're software agnostic in what we've created, right? Connectivity is all about your unique software program talking your unique language, but translating it, like Nate was just saying, into the language of what your counterparty wants to talk about. And that's really what Exchange is, a Rosetta Stone for retail energy, right? The other place we're trying to focus on connectivity is how people communicate through our product EnerChat. We really believe that, I'm going back to my early days, right? AOL Instant Messenger, and I, added a chat room, and I added people, and we formed a group and had great conversations. Probably dorky young Jason Beck was still talking about business back in, when I was 13 to 14 years old too. But with our product EnerChat, this is the same concept where you can speak fluidly to your supplier channel managers, or maybe even, again, with other ancillary products and services, and having a place where we can even eventually do secure transactions through chat. Getting everything out of email and Excel has to be one of those things that we have to focus on as an industry. Those are not scalable tools. I'm sure we'll talk more about that, later, but connectivity being number one. Number two would be efficiency. I think when you think about how we evolve as an industry, Nate touched on it before, you got these 2,000 brokers and 300 suppliers, and there's this intermingled web of some people working with some people, et cetera. And honestly, I think a lot of other people have tried to solve this by saying, let's do a marketplace. It's not how retail energy works. Suppliers don't want to race to the bottom. They want to be able to be differentiated, and they want to choose the partners that they want to work with. Brokers are the same way. They don't want to sell for every retailer. They want to sell for the people that they trust, that they work with on a regular basis. And when we talk about efficiency of how that comes together, the exchange was just that. It was a way for there's probably about 40 or so brokers out there that have their own software, maybe another 20 on other software platforms, and we have 120 on Sparkplug. Majority still exist on Excel and email, right? So this efficiency of communication, bring your own software, instead of 1.2 million connections like Nate was mentioning, how about 2,300, right? 2,000 plus 300. That allows this evolvement of technology to come through faster.
What's exchange?
The last piece.
Oh, sorry. So you're talking about exchange, and I went to your website and I noticed you got a lot of products, by the way.
Just 8 today.
What's exchange versus exchange live?
Great question. So very different actually, right? So exchange is this API, right? This API model. And so that's what Sparkplug and Propeller use to speak to each other, right? And we have just opened those APIs up to those brokers that use their own software that want to still communicate with one line of communication, as well as those suppliers that might have spent, I don't know, $100 million building out, something like Salesforce. So that is what really Exchange is. It's that connectivity layer.
Mm-hmm.
Exchange Live is formerly Core Marketplace. I'd love Nate to talk a little bit more about Exchange Live. It's a product that I've just recently come to know and have sold 3 times already. So it's a legit product, but I'd love Nate to share his thoughts.
Yeah, the reason for the naming is the idea of exchange is sort of brokers and suppliers sharing information. The exchange platform is really, as Jason said, it's about just the data level sharing. There's no user interface. You don't log in and type anything in, right? You sort of wire up your systems, and it allows you to communicate through one point to any other counterparty, right, in the industry on a common language. So you have one API to connect to rather than hundreds and potentially thousands. Exchange Live is sort of that same thing around deals, meaning brokers and suppliers coming together and exchanging information, but it's sort of the visual, the user interface, right, experience. And that's why we called it Live, is because it's really our, Exchange Live is our online eProcurement offering. So if you're a broker and you do public procurement and you need to publicly publish RFQs, you need to circulate to a named bidder set, you need to pre-qualify bidders by requiring them to complete certain tasks in advance. You need to have a transparent bid sourcing process. Now, we don't prescribe what type of process a broker uses. And, it's really just about having a login. So they send an invitation, your bidders get qualified, they can move on. You can have a series of procurement activities. Maybe you price the 12-month deal separately, or you group your meters in different ways so that you have different load blocks that you're bidding out in different ways. So we're not becoming the broker. I think this is a big key kind of theme that you'll see is we recognize that there are different types of brokers out there. Some really do a lot of kind of online sourcing. Some don't do any. Some do aggregations. Some price one deal at a time. They think that's the best way to serve their customer base. Some use a third-party agent network where they're running one logo, single branded campaigns. We think of that as mass market, right, in terms of how they reach those customers. Some always price their full relationship set on every deal because they think that's my duty to my customer. So we're not prescribing how to be a broker, whether one way is good or one way is bad or one way is better or one way is less better. We're saying the broker marketplace, the channel marketplace, right, has demanded several demonstrated successful models to go to market and procure source energy transactions, right? Whether they're representing one brand and a person-to-person transaction, digitally or online and more sort of governmental, large C&I, where the customer needs to have an experience as part of their buying process.
You mean the reverse auction?
It does have a reverse auction capability, but the vast majority of transactions are not actually auctions. I mean, that's sort of, I think the novelty that we bring is allowing traditional procurement, traditional brokerage sourcing to be a visual experience for the customer. So the customer can experience, meaning see all of the different quotation data live as it comes in without having to force suppliers into an auction. And I think that's really something unique that we've.
That is unique. I've never heard of this before. Can you explain,
Yeah,
a little
so
more about
what
it?
is traditional brokerage, right? You sort of there's a data gathering phase, then there's a pricing stage, which is sort of identifying who might be a good candidate to price this load, whether we're talking about gas or power, right? What are the different product structures that we might want to see priced? And then, what's our process? Meaning, do we want to let's say we have 78 meters across 3 different utilities. Let's just pick power to keep it simple. And let's say that, there's a school of thought that thinks if I price utility-based groups, I would get a better overall weighted average price. Other people might say, no, you should do it based on load factor. You should put sort of all your dogs in one pool, let them get the high price, and then put all your good load in this other one, and that'll get you the best weighted average price for the customer. Other people say, there is no apples to apples comparison. What you really have to do is just get the data, evaluate every supplier's value proposition independently, and ultimately just make a consultative buying decision with the customer. And so again, we don't prescribe how that goes, but the idea that a supplier can log in, review source that data, they need to source it back into their system, and this is where it parallels the API. Right? In Exchange Live, you download the files, right? You download the meter list, you download the load history, you download the LOAs, right? In Exchange, it's coming via API right into the supplier's back office systems.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really kind of the parallel, but we certainly don't prescribe a reverse auction. There are cases where brokers require a reverse auction process. Sometimes it's dictated by the customer. In fact, New Jersey has a designated auction platform licensure, and we have several customers that are licensed using Exchange Live in that New Jersey marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
Young, I'll add on to that by saying, it's a branded experience too. I think Exchange Live, for those brokers that want to differentiate themselves from the fray of just making a phone call or just sending a proposal, right? That's the common way, and that's what Sparkplug really supports. But if those brokers that want to differentiate and really come up with their own unique process, Exchange Live gives them the framework to customize basically those bidding events that Nate talked about, fully white labeled, branded. That the only people that we care about showing Enerex brand to are those in retail energy. All the end use customers, let it be the broker, right? That the broker's the hero. We try to make the broker the hero. So that's really what Exchange Live is. It's bringing your suppliers, bringing really the customer, focusing on your end use customers' buying experience, and then obviously the broker as well in one pre-bid type of format that's customizable to everybody's unique needs. So
you get all the benefits
very
of
different.
like what you would think of as a reverse auction platform, which is logging, security, transparency. I know every bidder that I send it to. I know I have a log of everyone who declined, everyone who submitted a bid. The bids are timestamped, down to the nanosecond. They're put in order. So I have all of that tracking and transparency, but I don't have to force my suppliers into a reverse auction, right? I can allow them to submit quotations. We even allow the supplier to submit non-compliant bids. So let's say that a broker says, I want all in fixed full requirements. And the supplier says, we really think that, passing through transmission makes a lot of sense for this customer. In fact, we think the underlying market is overpricing fixed transmission charges on this contract term. And we think it would actually be in the customer's best interest to pass this through. Now, in a sort of blind reverse auction, they would say, oh, we don't like that because we can't have different products, right? We've got to force everyone into the same product. So our platform, Exchange Live, is really set up to be supplier friendly and specifically to allow them to submit different product structures and then even non-conforming bids. So if a broker says, I only want to see X, but I'll consider other terms, other product structures, right? Then allows the supplier to sort of put their ideas out there for the customer's consideration.
Allows the supplier to differentiate to their broker, client for sure.
Exactly.
Well, thanks for taking that little digression.
Sure.
I think that was really interesting. Jason, I think I cut you off though. You had another concept, another problem you were trying to solve.
It was, yeah. And I promise you, that's always something that I'll always do is circle us back to the original conversation, right? Very typical of my style. Yeah, we were talking about the three, like what are three things that we're working on now, right, as Enerex. And we talked about connectivity, right? We talked about efficiency, and I really actually appreciate the digression. To finish off efficiency, I think there's one more product out there to mention is Propeller, right? Propeller is our CRM, BRM, broker resource management tool. When we think CRM, we don't think about a place to store your data. That it is, but it needs to be well beyond that. Workflow automation, process improvement, et cetera. And what we're really trying to do with Propeller is make a retail electric supplier the hero of the broker market in terms of ease of doing business. Young, I've been a proponent of your study for quite some time now, and there was, I mean, when I was using it at Source Power and Gas back in 2015, it was very apparent that there was a lot of brokers out there that highly valued, almost as equally as pricing, although not quite, but almost as equally as pricing is the ease of doing business with a retail supplier. So then I asked the question, why are retail suppliers not easy to do business with, right? That if it's that important, that's what Propeller's focus really is. Easily communicating out, even automating some of the process. Could you imagine a world where you didn't have a matrix, that information just came seamlessly into your CRM as a supplier and was able to really go right to pricing, interconnected pricing, CIS, billing data, as well as load forecasting, all in one place, so you could seamlessly serve your broker clients, right? That's the efficiency that we're trying to tackle with many of our products, but especially Propeller. And the third piece, we said it was Nate said it was initiated in 2016. I still agree, is trust, right? Trust being the third, connectivity, efficiency, and trust. Now, within regards to trust, the reason why we're trying to solve this, because I think it's the only way that we as an industry, retail energy, proceed forward. Again, mentioning RFC, right? Bringing multiple parties together and to speak the same language, being competitors, but yet finding those commonalities, those base issues that we can solve collectively, which means that we'll save money, right? If we can solve those base issues that we all have together. And so, for where we're trying to solve trust is we've gone out, we have not taken on investment money from any, retail energy source, brokers, suppliers, et cetera. We are our own entity. We are not a broker. We are not a supplier. We hold no licenses whatsoever. We want people to trust us. And then we went out and got the gold standard in certification around trust, data security trust, which is ISO 27001. You can read more about it on our website. But this is really, Nate, in fact, you did a lot of the work for this too, of the, the legal review, et cetera. I'd love you to talk about more of what ISO, means to us.
Yeah, briefly, how do you say you can trust me? And usually the one thing you don't want to say is trust me, right? Because the type of person that says, oh, I'm very trustworthy, trust me, you can trust me, is probably not very trustworthy. So that's the one thing so we felt that one of the kind of long-running gold standards for sort of data security is the ISO 27001 standard. Microsoft has it, Amazon has it, banking software has it. We thought, wow, imagine if there were a platform in retail energy that had this standard. And as we sort of move and want to address larger and larger customers, we felt like we need to do the work first to show that we are trustworthy. Rather than saying we're trustworthy, let's demonstrate it through our behavior and through documented, auditable findings. So that's the first thing. And then second of all, is the New York DSA. By the nature of being a data supplier to CCAs in New York, you have to sign off on the data security agreement, which suggests ISO 27001 as a sort of standard. At the end of the regulation, they pulled the requirement for that. But we actually were already in process getting that. That was sort of a nice to have for us. And ultimately, we're one of the only software vendors out there who has signed off on this DSA requirement and is providing a DSA compliant platform. And I think this is probably something that's a trend as we look across PUC entities. We have the PSC in New York already sort of taking motion. It's not just CCA suppliers and DERs already have to also sign off on this. New York doesn't regulate brokers, as we all know. So that's not looming. But I can see this idea of stewardship of data and the expectation that you can't just take customer data and throw it in a spreadsheet and put it on some Dropbox file and email out a link to whoever you want, that there's some sort of requirement and expectation that we're stewards of this data and that we have to treat it as such, just like medical record data, and patient portability. So,
and specifically the third-party auditability of something like that. I think that, just saying that you do it is one thing, and then having somebody else not part of your organization come in and verify that you do that is a trend in many different industries. And that's something
global company, every employee and contractor said background checks, so we don't mess around with security. We know that, one fumble on security, it could be game over for a software company. And, we don't, that's something that we take super seriously. One other point I wanted to make on Propeller that Jason sort of alluded to but didn't make was, again, this lack of prescription. We're not saying, hey, you have to use our pricing engine, you have to use our credit engine, you have to use right? We're saying, hey, it's plug and play, right? This is sort of the orchestration layer. You plug in your pricing, you plug in your credit, you plug in your load forecasting, you plug in your risk management pieces. And we're sort of the orchestration piece that sits between all of that back office software, which there's a well-established industry of players there. And whereas most suppliers have had to build their own, right, in this space, which is the space between there and the channel facing piece, now there's an off-the-shelf solution that isn't tightly coupled with one of those. It's rare that someone's running pure play from one vendor. Oftentimes they got best of breed, or this EDI provider and that load forecast and this CIS
pricing's internal,
this pricing engine, right? So forth, this credit and risk. So we really felt like there is a need for something that was purpose built for retail energy, as opposed to say, again, go put 40 million in Salesforce. Eventually you'll get a retail energy platform. Was affordable for the mid-market supplier, right? That's really where we're targeting, right? It's the mid-market supplier, and yet out of the box comes ready to plug into, your different back office systems, and is not competing with, right? We're not offering a pricing engine, we're not offering an EDI platform, we're not offering these other things, right?
Yeah. And just imagine like some of those suppliers that merge and all the back office systems that are kind of overlapping and perhaps competing.
Sure.
We're ready to help.
Definitely a land grab. Who's going to end up with the contract at the end of the day, or we all still coexist. You can look at, there's several suppliers out there who've done a lot of acquisitional growth, and they run one of everything. Two of some things. In the Northeast they run this, in ERCOT they run that. And obviously different suppliers of software have strengths, just like regional strengths, just like the actual market participants. So there's sometimes a call for that too.
Yeah. Well, speaking of M&A, you guys help brokers with their M&A processes. If they kind of come to you and say, hey, we're looking to sell, how do you help them? And what's that process been like?
Yeah. So the first way we help them is and I think it's one of the challenges that most brokers face is that, as we said, everything's still in email and Excel. So, what we do is we would take obviously their whatever they have. Some people have everything in Excel, and we can give them a data format and we can massage that and get it into a CRM, Sparkplug specifically. But I really feel like the better way to tell this story is how we've helped solve this already for another broker in Sean Kelly. Let's start off with the problem. I'm sorry. First off, I feel like the biggest problem here is their data sucks, right? So brokers that even want to sell, and how would we help them is that they don't really have great data. It's definitely not in any format. Some of our brokers that have come to us literally have came with, here's a Dropbox file of every single contract that I've signed. Now think about going into M&A world. Young, you're obviously an M&A expert yourself, doing several transactions and assisting on others. You know the concept of a data room, right? Right,
yeah,
a data room, right?
Yeah.
We all do. Now in a broker transaction,
it's got to be dumbed down. Yeah, and the more PowerPoint presentations, the better, honestly. Yeah.
Right. Yes. Right. That's so funny.
You need the hockey
'Cause I've
stick
been-
forecast. Don't forget the hockey stick forecast.
That's
Very
the 5-year outlook that, hey, I'm going to renew every single deal and you should just trust me that I'm
120% new renewal rate.
right. So, and this is the concept of even those brokers that want to go sell. How do they do that? Right. So, and then the flip side of those people that have really, really tough, data issues, then you get a friend, then you got somebody like Sean Kelly, a friend of the Enerex family. He had used Sparkplug for 3 years, and then he had decided he's a very entrepreneurial guy. He said, I want to go follow my dreams of building more technology for retail energy. And that's with his AI, enabled load forecasting platform, Ampion. And, his original brokerage firm was Bridge Energy. And he knew he wanted to sell that to really get the seed capital to move forward with this bigger dream. And he told the story. It's online for anybody who wants to see it. But he really ran 3 reports out of Sparkplug. It was, here's my forecasted future revenue report, right? Here is my audit history of all my deals to prove out that I'm actually being paid on every single deal that I say I'm getting paid on. And you can see that audit trail. And then lastly, the missing payments, right? What was that additional revenue that he hadn't gotten yet, but was working with the supplier to say, hey, why am I not being paid on this deal, right? That's what a data room really is. Those 3 reports out of Sparkplug, I'm good to sell. And we've had several clients that have been able to do that super seamlessly. And so, the first part of that is, if you ever want to be a broker that even wants to think about selling, get on a software platform now, get a process, right? Get something that you can execute on, use every single day. So when that time comes, it's as simple as running 3 reports. Where do you think, Young, do you think broker activity has picked up or slowed down, or where do you see M&A activity right now?
It's definitely slower, little less demand for it. And coronavirus, that's thrown a monkey wrench into the whole process. Just, can you trust the forecast data? It's really hard right now. So I think, for a little while, we're probably going to see a slowdown, but, I think with all things, it's cyclical. It'll pick up again. Right.
Yeah, and so obviously the data being a big issue for brokers, that being the number one thing that would prevent M&A activity from picking back up, I think, is because these processes take so long, right? Just to even get that book, if you will, in a decent order. And then I think you just touched on it too. My second point here, Young, would be is I think there's still a huge disconnect between the bid and the ask spread, right? I think it really, I've had many people call me recently and going, hey, there must be distressed assets on there. I can get a broker book for 40 cents on the dollar. Or they kind of look at it as like, I'm going to buy an annuity stream, a la JG Wentworth. I see all these commercials on TV when I watch. I'm going to buy your annuity stream. And then, wait a minute, then you have the broker side of this vision, which is they have deep relationships. It's similar to any other industry. They're far from distressed. Most of them aren't even looking to sell unless the right offer came around. And I think that this, not a lot of major threats to their business because they have their business and it's not going up or down dramatically. It leads brokers to just think that they deserve a multiple. And I'm not saying they don't. Those that have 90+% renewal rates, why wouldn't they want a higher, why wouldn't their ask be higher than what these bids are coming in at? So I think that as more brokers differentiate themselves, as we see end use customers choosing a specific broker because something specific that broker offers them that nobody else does, I think maybe some of the brokers that are still on email and Excel, those are the ones that end up looking to sell because of the fact that they're getting customer churn. And I do see that happening. I do in the near future, I see that brokers that are not really serving their client well, that is where you'll see an M&A activity start to pick up.
Interesting. Yeah. All right. So let's maybe, I think we're perhaps testing the patience of our audience. Let's kind of.
So typical of a Jason Beck, on webinar. And then you had Nate. My goodness, please continue.
So let's try to wrap it up on this one. So you guys, are leaders in the space for sure, and you process a lot of broker transactions. Probably the most out of any software provider in the space.
Safe bet.
So if you were to kind of think about your client base, what do you think are the characteristics of the most successful brokers that you work with?
I'd say number one, they're process oriented. I think everybody knows that relationships are key in this industry, but a lot of people have relationships and struggle to put together an enterprise. And I think the ones that can scale beyond kind of the solopreneur phase recognize that there's a process, and there's also Jason likes to quote the phrase that retail is detail, right? There's this idea that to do well in retail energy requires an attention to detail, requires watching the data, knowing which meters switched and didn't, and paying attention. That really can make the difference between profit and non-profit. So I think this nature of brokers who are process oriented, they think of it as a business as opposed to a sort of sales pursuit or a collection of individuals, and take it seriously. And I think that's maybe one industry trend that's played well in our favor, is sort of the growing up of the channel. Even in spaces like mass market, I think people who orchestrate networks of individuals well with process and a platform are winning, as opposed to sort of loose bands of sometimes work together individuals. And I think suppliers have a bigger appetite to work with people who kind of have their act together and present a consistent experience, not just for their customer, but experience for the supplier in doing business with them. And it's very difficult to be consistent when you don't have a process. So that would be number one.
Yeah, and
process orientation.
Process, something that's scalable as well, right? I would say the brokers that I use, I work with from time to time will say, hey, I do have a process, right? I do this on my Excel spreadsheet. Cool. Could you train somebody else on that, right? Is it really scalable if you had an ops person? I would say that most things in Excel aren't going to be scalable, simply just because of the fact that it's your way of thinking, right? And you put this together versus a tool where I can customize it to my liking, but I now have a process. This is what happens at every stage in the customer life cycle, both pre-deal and post-deal. Those are the customers that we see really growing fast and growing well.
And it's not secure. I mean, under the DSA, there's some question as to emailing customer load data is even allowed, because it's a transfer of data to another system. And there's a chain of custody requirement there that destination system has to also subscribe to these security requirements. So I think as security and data privacy sort of come on trend in utilities, I think it could really be a long-term threat, maybe even not even long, but maybe more mid-term threat to sort of this spreadsheet-based broker. I think CapEx on differentiators is another piece. There's definitely sort of a segment. It's not a particularly large segment, but maybe a 5 or 10% segment in the broker space who's like, okay, we're going to hire a bunch of programmers and we're going to build the world's best commission reconciliation software. Well, something that a customer never cared about is how good you are at counting your money. And they won't pay a premium for it, and you won't get a premium for it. Where we have seen premiums is in differentiating investment. So brokers who built unique customer-facing experiences, unique agent-facing experiences, or third-party, not all just specifically agent, but sort of the channel of channels, if you will. Those firms have both scale because they're optimizing their CapEx where it matters. And, I think those are areas where we're really not playing. We want brokers to have room to differentiate and be different and be a vibrant, differentiated ecosystem versus everyone is same. Where it doesn't pay to be unique is in commodity back office data processing. And that's really where we shine. And we can do it cheaper and faster and better than anybody out there by 2 orders of magnitude. So, I think that's just some brokers just really say, well, I have to you know, parse my own utility historical usage data. And it's sort of like, no one cares how good you are or how bad you are at that. The market's never going to pay for that. It's very hard to get return on that capital, again, versus differentiating CapEx. I think the last thing maybe is a focus on the top of funnel. I think a lot of kind of the solopreneurs, ones that struggle to grow, they really sort of just farm in their sort of existing account base. And you can probably do that with a spreadsheet and a sort of BlackBerry sort of mentality. Like I can just sort of text and call my way into, you can make some money that way. In terms of scaling and really, if you said success is growth or somehow linked to growth, I think at some point you have to think about marketing. You have to be more to your customer than just a price getter. And I think that's another thing that we try to unlock for brokers. Some people may not know that we send 750,000 emails out on behalf of brokers a year. That's a lot of email, okay? But if you think that we have several million meters sort of under contract across our broker footprint, we think there's even more that could be done. But how do you create a touch, an interaction that's branded, that's differentiated, that gives the customer a sense that you're there for the entire energy experience and not just sort of at contract renewal time, which we all want to be there for contract renewal time. But I think that the successful brokers understand that it's the care and feeding of that customer base and that being visible and being present and having something unique that customers can see that's more than just a number. I think some brokers think, well, I need to put my brand and then just the only thing from the supplier proposal comes is the number, okay, plugged into my spreadsheet. I think it's a missed opportunity, the idea that we're going to commoditize our supplier relationships. And also something I don't think is scalable, that the idea that all suppliers are going to quote the same product and I'm just going to put a bunch of numbers on a page. I think the future probably looks a lot more like group health insurance, where I need like 17 rows just to compare the comparable plans, right? And I need a broker to sort of walk me through, okay, this one has a lower deductible, but you're going to pay more in the emergency rooms, but your plan doesn't actually use that much emergency room. So maybe that's a good trade for you. That consultative approach. And I think that the future is bright for brokers and suppliers who can differentiate and really do take care of their customers' full need versus just put numbers on a page.
Customer communication is huge. And Nate, with that CapEx comment too, it's like our brokers that are on Sparkplug, they're using that CapEx that they would have otherwise spent building their own systems on marketing and customer facing elements and et cetera. And they're growing their businesses way more rapidly, than others. And so that CapEx piece is a really good point as well.
Yeah, I mean, in general, a lot of good points in this hour, and all different. And I think just highlighting, all the knowledge and all the tools that you guys bring to the table. So thank you very much for your insights today, and I hope this gets a lot of views, and we'll get a transcript of this for those lazy to watch, and we'll take out some highlights from this. But thank you so much for your time and your insights today.
Cheers, Young. Thanks so much for the
everything that you do in the industry. You're a voice of talk about trust and truth. I think you're something of a beacon in this industry, and I think we're certainly all glad to have you out there, telling the story of the industry.
Cheers.
Yeah, likewise.
All right, thanks all.
Okay. Take care.